Please welcome back to the stage David Gellis, Managing Correspondent of Climate Forward, and his guest, R.J. Scaringe, founder and CEO of Rivian.
RJ, thank you for joining me.
Of course.
I was saying backstage, I'm like ready to take off my tie when I saw him.
I was going to wear his tie.
I've got more work to do later in the day.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So Rivian is an electric truck company. Most people here probably know that. It's been around for 15 years, which surprised me. But I can honestly say, I mean, I travel the country these days. I'm seeing Rivians on the road, which is a remarkable breakthrough. Like, we're seeing these things out there in the wild in all corners of the country. But this company has had its challenges, as has the entire industry. In recent months, despite some of the incentives we heard about earlier today from Climate Advisor Zadie, many other car makers have pulled back on their plans for electric vehicle expansion. Chargers can still be very hard to come by. You've paused your own plans for a major plant in Georgia. So I want to start the conversation by asking you, what's going on with this industry? Like, I think there's a sense maybe the hype was overblown.
Yeah. This is something I spend a lot of time talking about, and I think it's really important to recognize whenever you look at big transitions, recognize what the end state's going to be. And then you can work backwards from that to look at what's the path between where we are today and what the end state looks like. And it's unequivocally the end state that we're going to be in a world where 100% of our vehicles are electric. We can debate whether that's in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. But the reality is to get to that point, it is a massive transition. There's around 1.5 billion vehicles on our planet today. We build around 90 million vehicles a year. So if you imagine every new car we build from today forward was electric, it would still take us 15 to 20 years to replace the entire global fleet. And as much as it seems like electrification is in full swing and upon us, we are still in the very, very early days of this transition. And one of the key enablers for driving that shift to 100% of new vehicle sales being electric and ultimately the whole fleet converting to electric is customers need choices. Customers need to have different form factors, different brands, different vehicle positions, different combinations of features and attributes. And today we just don't have a lot of choice. And that is really at the core of one of the reasons Rivian exists. And our focus as we think about expanding our product portfolio is to give customers more choices, to give customers reason to make that switch.
Okay, and I take your point that we can't judge what is inherently a long-term transition. I mean, I recognize this, we're talking about decades, maybe generations here, to get to that 100% moment. But there was also, I feel like, sort of a surge of enthusiasm and a belief that maybe that momentum was actually going to start to accelerate.
Yeah.
And what we're instead seeing is that the sales growth is not fully declining yet, but that growth has really started to plateau. How do you explain that? Why aren't consumers buying more EVs right now in the United States?
Well, you said two things that are important. First is sales growth. So the market is still expanding. So it's not as if the market for electric vehicles is shrinking. 2024 will be the highest volume of electric vehicles sold ever. We expect 2025 to be higher than 2024. But it's not growing at the 50% per year that we'd all wish it was or hoped it would be. And it does come back to choice. So if you look at, just think about for yourself, if you're looking to buy a vehicle at a price point of under $50,000 in the United States, there are very few compelling choices. Rivian, with our flagship set of products, we have an R1, what we call R1T and R1S. It's a truck and SUV, priced over $70,000. It's a premium product. It's how we've launched the brand. We're the number one selling premium vehicle in California. Not number one selling electric vehicle, number one selling premium vehicle in California. But that's at price points of over $70,000. So our next set of products coming in at under $50,000 is a really key enabler to give customers an alternative. And frankly, we need many alternatives. And I think because of how in technology we often see a very small number of dominant players, I think there's often the view that in the transportation space, that there's going to be one or two or three winners. There needs to be 20, 25 different producers of highly compelling products. And it's not a winner-take-all space. To build 90 million cars a year, to build 1.5 billion cars over the next couple of decades, We need multiple successful efforts on this front.
We were just talking backstage about sort of the broader business landscape. And what you just described is a scenario that I frankly have a hard time imagining, a scenario where there's 25 compelling cases. I mean, the United States market sort of like trends towards, if not monopoly, consolidation.
Yeah.
Is there something about the EV market that's different from the way that internal combustion engine cars are sold that you think would allow that to actually happen?
Yeah, I was speaking globally, but just to give some background on the auto industry today, the biggest car manufacturers in the world, in the combustion world, are about 10% market share, and there's a few of them that produce around 10 million cars a year. So it's not like traditional tech where you'll have 3 companies that provide all the services. And what I think is going to happen within electrification is we'll see some consolidation because of the opportunities to share platforms or share technology, but it's not where you're going to see 2 or 3 companies. It's going to be more than 5, less than 10, maybe more than 5, less than 15.
Okay.
But I think the objective actually is more on creating choice for customers.
Staying here in the United States, electric vehicles have a partisanship issue.
Yeah.
They remain wildly more popular with Democrats than with Republicans. They have become a fixture of presidential campaigns. Former President Trump has recently said some nice things about Tesla after winning the endorsement of Elon Musk. But for years has disparaged EVs, saying that they were going to kill the American auto industry. You've thought about this a lot. How do you explain this? Why are Republicans so allergic to EVs?
That's a question. It's the question in itself it's surprising. It is a question. There's no reason electrification should be a partisan issue, and we try really hard as a company to try to sway discussions away from that. And in fact, even in how we position our brand, how we position our products, one of the things we talk about internally, and it also translates to how we talk about what we're doing externally, is thinking about the decisions we're taking as a company, the decisions we're taking as society, through the lens of our kids' kids' kids. And the beauty of that is that whether you're on the right or on the left, you care about creating a better future outcome for your kids. And it's indisputable that we've built this amazingly large industrial complex with our global economy. In the last 150 years, we built technologies we couldn't have dreamed of just a few centuries ago. And it was, of course, built on the back of fossil fuels, that immediate access to highly dense energy. But that same source of energy is both finite, meaning it won't run for forever, but also is leading to a lot of significant challenges on our planet, particularly climate, which fits this week. And to me, it's so clear that the sooner we move off of dependency on fossil fuels, the better off we are. The world is going to move that direction, so it's important for our competitiveness as a country and for us as a technology-leading country to be on the front end of that shift. And so, for reasons that really don't make technical sense or logical sense, it's become partisan. But really, this is something around creating a future for our children and our kids' kids' kids, where they can enjoy the same world that we live in.
Do you have a hypothesis for why this issue has become so animated as a partisan one?
Boy, I do think there is a unfortunate, massive amount of misinformation that exists on electrification. And one of the roots of that misinformation is a lack of understanding of the battery supply chain, and then also a lack of appreciation for the scale of the challenge. And what I mean by that is, a reason often cited to not electrify is that our grid still has coal or natural gas on it. And so today, just to put some numbers to this, the U.S. grid is about 60% powered by fossil fuels, 40% by renewables and nuclear.
And the logic being it doesn't make sense to power an electric car with coal power.
Now, what's missed on that is just like it's going to take us decades to convert our vehicle fleet to electric, it's going to take us decades to wind down all the coal power plants, natural gas plants. But in the end state, I hope that by the end of my life, our grid is mostly carbon-free and our vehicles are almost entirely electric. But we have to start somewhere. If we wait for this giant green perfection button to arrive, we'll wait for forever.
Okay.
And saying all that, even with a grid that's 60% fossil fuel powered, it's significantly more efficient to run an electric vehicle because the vehicle itself is so efficient. So to take energy from battery and convert it to mechanical power at the wheels, it's like mid 90% efficient, but you're running off of a power plant that's running at a much higher level of efficiency than like the mini power plant that is an engine in a car.
Yeah.
So some of that leads to this view that, well, we'd rather have energy independence. We have a lot of coal. We have lots of petroleum reserves. We can do that without having to resort to, relying on other countries or other sources of technology. But the reality is the end state, we're going to have to rely on non-fossil fuel-based sources of energy.
Okay. We've got an election coming up in just 40 days from now. President Trump has talked about repealing or rolling back as much of the Inflation Reduction Act as he could. We earlier today heard from Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation, who echoed that sentiment. And particularly, I mean, one of the things that they are quick to point out is that they would try to eliminate this EV tax credit, which has been trying to sort of seed the market in the United States for EVs. What would be the effects of that policy and some of their other efforts to slow the growth of renewable energy and slow the momentum in EVs if the next administration were to follow that kind of a playbook?
You can imagine every company that plays any part in the energy space has got two different strategies of what happens under each scenario. And what I can say is, the business we're building, and speaking for a lot of the other businesses that are in either the energy space or transportation space, see beyond the time horizon of 4 years. And the scale of this shift is big enough such that, while certainly there could be headwinds created with policies that are, let's say, less pro-electrification, more pro-continued use of fossil fuels, in the end state, it doesn't change. And what it changes is the shape of the curve. And the thing that I think is most concerning when I hear those policies is less about us as Rivian. In fact, in some ways, on a relative basis, what that would lead to is a lot of the incumbents slow down their efforts. That's really bad for the world. That actually creates more of a competitive advantage for us and other pure play electric efforts like Tesla. But I think it's bad for my kids. I think it's like very bad for us to not be moving as rapidly as we can towards this transition. So I have a lot of close relationships with CEOs of large incumbent car companies. We have a massive partnership with Volkswagen as an example. And what I'm always speaking to them on is to say, look past the short-term horizon. We need to be thinking about what the world looks like in the 2030s. And I do want to call out, because I think some of the things that get missed here, how fast this transition is happening. And for us as the U.S. to ignore it is really short-sighted. Most developed countries around the world have policies in place that will require all new vehicle sales to be electric from 2035 onwards. In the United States, the California Resource Board has that in place. So from 2035 forward, you will not be able to buy a car in California that has an engine in it. And 2035 used to sound like a long way away. That's 10 years away. My kids will still be in high school. And so this is not some esoteric, hypothetical, far-out thing. This is going to happen globally. It's going to happen in parts of the United States by policy that's passed. And we should be running towards the front edge of the curve on this as a country, from a competitive landscape point of view, from a national security point of view. We shouldn't be avoiding what is the inevitable future. We've always, as a country, been leaders. We've been leaders in, think of any technology shift, we've been on the front edge of that. And I think that needs to be the same here with electrification.
Well, I would argue that perhaps it's not when it comes to EVs. You look at what's happening in China. I mean, China is selling as many EVs in 1 month as we tend to be in 1 year. Do you feel like the protectionism of these country and this administration's policies has gone too far in limiting EV growth as it pertains to allowing Chinese vehicles in? And how do you explain what China has been able to pull off in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, just to look at to describe a little bit more around what's happening in China. China has rapidly become the leader in terms of total electric vehicle sales, in the world. And a big part of that has been a long-term, multi-decade strategy that they've had around materials and battery supply chain. That's frankly played out pretty well for them, where they've built a lot of technical strength there. Saying all that, regardless of the outcome of this upcoming election cycle, what's becoming more and more clear is that on a global basis, there's a desire to bring manufacturing and production of products closer to the markets that they're sold in. And we see that in almost every major market where there's a movement to make sure that the jobs are staying local and to make sure that the technologies are also locally being developed. And so we see that here in the United States, and we have, of course, lots of relationships with companies in China, particularly in the supply chain as we think about like parts, metal supply, those sorts of things. But we do believe that the vast majority of the EVs that are going to be sold in the United States will be produced in the United States. And we think the same is true in China. The vast majority of EVs that are going to be sold in China will be produced in China. And because this is a global challenge, it's really important that we do have a global supply chain and global technology for this.
What might we be able to learn from China, though, given how fast they are bringing down the prices and the range? I mean, the performances, I'm sure you know. We're seeing really extraordinary breakthroughs over there, both in terms of the price, the simplicity, frankly, of how some of these vehicles are built, and the range that they're getting, which I think remains a big headwind here.
Well, I said something before, and I actually want to double down on that. I do really believe there's a lot of technology leadership that still comes from the United States. And if you're to look at even at the like battery chemistry level, a lot of the chemistries that now China dominates from a supply chain point of view were developed in the United States. Lithium iron phosphate was a chemistry developed here in the U.S. And I think that dynamic is continuing to play out. We see it in particular with artificial intelligence, robotics. These are technical areas where the U.S. is leading. And we see that translate into some of the future state technologies in electric vehicles. Now, we have different tastes between the U.S. and China in terms of design. And so I've spent a lot of time driving those types of vehicles. They're different in terms of how the user interface is set up. The digital ecosystem around them is quite a bit different. But both sides are learning from each other. So there are lots of Rivians being taken apart in China, and there are lots of Chinese cars being taken apart in the United States. And that's okay. That's actually not a bad thing. It's good. We're collectively cross borders, cross companies learning from each other. And that competitive landscape, I think, is ultimately wonderful for us. I mean, we have a tracker to see where all of our cars end up. And we're like, oh, that company is taking apart a Rivian right now. That's good.
Important question. Do you then track every vehicle you sold? Like if someone's driving a Rivian, are you seeing where they're going to?
Depends. So this is a privacy question. So we have a whole. We really take this seriously because these are connected vehicles. Every vehicle is incredibly capable of knowing what it's doing. So there's a very robust privacy policy we put in place as a company where we allow you as the user to decide what you provide back to us. Anything you do provide back to us, of course, is anonymized. But we use it a lot for making sure that our vehicles are predictively in good shape. So if there's an issue on your vehicle, we generally know about it, and we reach out to the customer to take care of that.
What's the default? Am I automatically sharing when I drive it off the lot?
It's actually, before you use the car, it's one of your user profile settings.
Okay, there you go.
We force you to tell us.
Okay.
The default is blank.
Default is you have to make a choice.
Yeah.
All right, I want to talk about charging. More than a year ago now, you agreed to switch your charging standard to the one developed by Tesla. Is that right? Yeah. And since then, Tesla has been, as I understand it, pretty slow to provide your customers the adapters that are needed to hook up to Tesla superchargers. What did that experience teach you about dealing with Elon Musk?
Well, look, one of the big, back to adoption of electric vehicles, one of the big points of friction and points of concern around electric vehicles is charging. And if you had asked me, I don't know, 5 years ago, how would I have envisioned the charging landscape and ecosystem building out? I would have said emphatically that lots of investment is going to come in. You're going to see multiple third parties build up charging infrastructure in much the same way that we saw the gas station infrastructure build out in the early 1900s. And I would have been wrong. And we started to realize that maybe 3 years ago, that there just wasn't the level of investment necessary in our charging infrastructure to drive mass adoption. And because of that, we started to develop our own charging platforms. So we have our own DC fast chargers. We're building a network we call the Rivian Adventure Network. And there's one great network at scale today, which is Tesla's network. And if you were to measure the quality of a network by two things. I'd say it's density of chargers and then the uptime, meaning like how often they work. And for anybody that has an electric vehicle that's used some of the other networks, one of the most frustrating things in the world is you're on a road trip, you pull into a charger, you don't have a lot of time, you plug it in, and the charger's broken. So our network today, which is amazingly and indicatively, to my point, it's the fourth largest network in the United States. We're just getting started building it. Us and Tesla are the only two networks that have uptime that's close to 100%. Tesla's like 99% or 98.5%. So the reason I say all that is we put an agreement together with Tesla that allows us to access their network. A number of other manufacturers have done this as well. And our network, we're about to open up. So today it's Rivian only. I'm really excited to open it up so that there are two great networks being built in the United States. We hope more. I truly hope lots of investment starts to flow and we see other people invest to build out these networks. But in my view, there needs to be more than two high-quality sources of energy for driving longer distances.
But when it comes to making that decision, do you regret it? I mean, do you feel like Elon or Tesla sort of presented you with a false bill of goods?
Look, we wish the adapter ramp up was faster. There's Tesla adapters. There's also we've independently developed something that's ramping. The supply chains are complex. Ramp up. This is not some intentional slowing of the ramp of that supply chain. Tesla's been a great partner to us on this, and we've particularly you think about all the noise that happens, and you maybe imagine that there's some tension that exists between top of house between these two companies. That's not the case. But more than that, at a working level, the teams work great. I mean, engineers work really well with engineers. So our engineers work close with the Tesla supercharger team to make sure that there's a beautiful software integration. I had a customer come to me the other day and he's like, I couldn't believe I pulled in a Tesla station, I plugged in my Rivian, and it just worked. And like behind the scenes, of course, we made sure all the credit card information between our account was shared with Tesla, but it was like so seamless that it was a zero thought had to go into it. And that's because our engineers work really well with the Tesla engineers.
Well, that's good. But you said there's not a lot of friction between the top of the house. That said, Elon Musk on Twitter very recently said he expected Rivian to be bankrupt in 6 quarters. What's your reply to that?
Look, I think I can't speak for him, but I think there's a lot of noise in the world, and one of the things I really enjoyed about starting Rivian is I remember it was 15 years ago. I started the company with no capital, no team, no supply chain, all these things that take a lot of effort, and you need all of them to launch. So if you need many billions of dollars, you need thousands of engineers, you need really robust technology, you need a brand that people are going to care about, a product that's interesting. And you have none of the things in the beginning. So through that process, you have a lot of people that will look at it and say, boy, the likelihood of success is near zero. And that's okay. That's part of building a business. And I think for anybody that's thinking about building a business or is building a business, it's really important to get comfortable with the fact that people on the outside may say, I don't think this is going to work.
But he's your partner.
That's okay.
What did you say to him when that happened?
I think.
Do you have a personal relationship with Elon?
I think in this. My broader point is I think it's really important to have a thick skin. And to not let little things upset you. Tesla's a partner to us. We work with them. It doesn't require them to always say the nicest things, and doesn't require us to respond. But at a working level, the teams are working well.
Tesla sales have been softening as well. It's not just other EV makers. Do you feel like any of that is attributable to Elon's political activity or his focus on Twitter?
This
is a market dynamic question. It's a serious question.
It's a serious question, and I'll give you a serious answer. Part of the challenge in the EV space, and it comes back to the overall demand, is there are not a lot of choices. And so the Tesla product range, I've owned multiple Teslas. The Model 3, Model Y are great products. But it's a very specific vehicle. The Model Y doesn't answer every form factor, doesn't answer every product feature trade-off that customers may want. Meaning, I don't think 90 million people on the planet are going to buy Model Ys. I think there's a wide range of demand needs. And it's a product that's launched many years ago. And so there is a lack of alternatives to that in terms of form factor. And it's a product that's been in the market for a while. So Do I think what we call our R2, which is our lower cost product, which is coming, which will be priced very similar to Model Y, do I think that that's going to do really well because of the vacuum of competition? Absolutely. Do we have the data from customers saying, we really want an R2, could you sell it to us sooner? Yes. But I think it's actually a necessary element, and I think what we'll see from Tesla and others, hopefully, is continued new products, new product form factors that need to come to market to drive us to much higher levels of
and just to come back to the question, do you feel like Elon's political activity, his focus on Twitter, is affecting the EV market as a whole?
I don't think it's affecting the EV market as a whole. I think it's really important, and you can see me navigating it through your questions here, that we don't make EVs a political thing. And I'm saddened by the fact that they are. It doesn't make any sense. It's sort of like if you had asked me to predict things 15 years ago that were going to happen, I would have never predicted a lot of things, but I wouldn't have predicted that electric vehicles would somehow be talked about as a positive or negative thing based upon what political party you're in. And I think we collectively, society, should exercise the leadership in trying to elevate the discussions out of the mud and out of that, and intentionally driving it towards a longer-term horizon, which is we're all in this room because of our kids, and we're all. And I actually think a lot of these debates, a lot of the friction is just different interpretations of what's best for our kids. And what I always like to try to bring it back to is we as a species, there's about 8 billion of us on the planet. There's no reasonable way in which we could live anywhere other than Earth. And it's our only home. It's a beautiful home. And we need to do everything we can to protect it. And that means transitioning this massive industrial complex we've built in the last 125, 150 years to renewable energy and to things that consume renewable energy and carbon-free energy, I should say more broadly. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because there's incumbent businesses that are going to be disrupted as part of that. There's going to be assets that we have to write off. There's going to be new jobs that have to get created, legacy jobs that need to be transitioned to this. There's lots of change. It's not easy. And depending on how that transition affects you, you may have a point of view that charges you up in a certain way.
Okay. I've got a lot more questions, but we are unfortunately out of time. RJ, thank you very much.